You are listening to Aim Higher, a Catholic podcast designed to instruct and to encourage the daily practice of our faith.
Pax et bonum, peace and good to you all. Welcome to another episode of Aim Higher. I'm Sister Catherine, and joining me today is His Excellency, Most Reverend Giles, Butler, OFM, which means we are going to be discussing a virtue.
So, very good.
So for the month of April, the virtue is patience, and that is quite a virtue that I think we all every day are tested in trying for. So, and to start us off, you picked out a quote for us, and I guess I'll read it. Because you'll probably, and then it's your response. So, I mean, because that may be all I put to this episode. Who knows? Okay. If God causes you to suffer much, it is a sign that He has great designs for you, and that He certainly intends to make you a saint. And if you wish to become a great saint, entreat Him yourself to give you much opportunity for suffering. For there is no wood better to kindle the fire of holy love than the wood of the cross, which Christ used for His own great sacrifice of boundless charity. And this is from St. Ignatius Loyola.
Okay, very good. You make it sound like I put some thought into that quote, but actually you just opened the book and I pointed it.
Well, I feel it's rather timely because we just started the Easter season, really, and which means before we can have the Easter season, we have the Passion. So, I mean, and we have to have that connection to Passion really every day. And what better way to...
Well, as we were reading that, one of the first thoughts that came to mind is that I tell the children, actually I tell the adults as well, that the catechism is very clear. Why did God make me? God made me to know, love, and serve Him in this world so that I can be happy with Him in heaven. That is God's will for me, to be happy with Him in heaven. That's what He wants. God is all-powerful. He can do all things. God can get me into heaven. But there's only one thing that can stop Him. We have the power to get in God's way and to ruin His plans, and that is by not cooperating with Him. So God will get us into heaven. He will make us a saint unless we get in the way.
Unless we say no.
Unless we say no, we put an obstacle in the way. So I think it is really a wonderful thought that God wants us in heaven. And I often like to remind people that even our enemies, even those evil people that you see in the world, God has made them not to send them to hell. He made them for heaven. His will is that they go to heaven. And if we truly love God, that should be our will as well. We should never wish anyone harm or evil, but we should always wish them that which is good, that which is holy and pleasing, and their eternal salvation. So if we see evil or negative things around us, we should pray for those individuals. We should seek to correct the evil, to do what is good, so that not only we become saints in heaven, but all those that God has created begin to cooperate with Him and enter into that grace. So with that, we look at Christ has given us a cross. He's given us something to suffer. And that suffering should be welcomed. It is an opportunity for us to follow Jesus on the way of the cross. And as I point out quite frequently, He makes it very clear, you want to be my disciple, you must deny yourself, take up the cross daily, and come follow me. He tells us, learn of me, for I am meek and humble of heart. So we cannot run away from our crosses. We cannot run away from difficulties. And I like to point out, yes, if you run away from the cross that God has given you, you will just run smack dab into a worse cross, because it's a cross that you've chosen for yourself rather than the one that God has chosen. And God is perfect. He knows exactly what cross we need. So I like to think of Him as the doctor. We go to the doctor, and the doctor prescribes a medicine. He prescribes the dosage of the medicine, the frequency that we should receive the medicine. all of this is calculated for our best interest. Even if the medicine is bitter or difficult, we take it, we endure it because it is what is best for us. And so when we look upon the cross of Christ, or the cross that Christ has given us, it is not too hard, it's not too heavy, it's not too difficult. We can do all things in him who strengthens us. This cross is exactly what we need because it's been given to us by a loving Father. And so I think it is important that we remind ourselves of this frequently, especially when we're feeling depressed or overwhelmed, or life is just not going the way we want it to.
Well, that just remind me, and maybe it's in this book, and even in this particular for this month, I'm not sure because I read different things, but there was the story of, well, I think there's similar ones, but one of them was with Mother Frances Cabrini, and when it was made known to her that, or was asked of her to begin a hospital, she really hesitated the idea. She disliked that idea. She was not excited about that idea whatsoever. She did schooling, but hospital was just, she felt that was too big for her. And one night she had a dream, and in her dream, she's in a hospital room and she sees the Blessed Mother tending to all these ill people, injured people in a hospital. And she wants to come and help the Blessed Mother, who then admonishes her, how can you want to help me when you refuse to do the job that's already placed in front of you? And I believe that there is Franciscan, we talk about Alexander of Hale. I think he was, when he first came into the Franciscan order, he had a temptation of the habit being too coarse, being too rough. Does that sound familiar? There's something.
No,
I'm
but
sorry.
that's okay.
I'm sorry to put you on a spot like that, because
I was just thinking Alexander of Hales, was he the
teacher
of St. Bonaventure
and St. Thomas Aquinas?
Yeah.
But I believe it was him who, in the beginning of his religious life, just despised the habit. And he had a dream, I believe it was of St. Francis carrying a cross, and he rushes to help St. Francis, and St. Francis chastised him. How can you dare come help me with this cross when you refuse to wear your habit, that habit of penance? So, I think we often can get frustrated with ourselves when we aren't bearing our crosses patiently. We know we need to, but yet we complain. And I guess it's helpful to know that even the saints had hesitation, but it's natural, I guess, to have that hesitation. We're human, we're fallen creatures, but it's to not give up. If you fall, get back up. And that's also how patience plays into it, persevering.
Persevering, yes. It's difficult to know what God's will is, especially of ourselves, and something that is distasteful. It's hard for us to contemplate that God really wants this for me, or that, and as a religious, it becomes quite a relief to realize that God's will is whatever the superior tells me. The superior wants me to do this, that is God's will for me, and this is what I must do. And that really takes a load off of the religious mind.
Yes.
In the world, I don't really know how you can deal with this other than to face, what is required of me in my job, at school, in my family, what needs to be done, what is before me. That is God's will. And not just religious, but even the laity, those pious Catholics who are striving to love God and serve God. How do I know what God wants me to do? And I think that is an excellent question that we should be asking ourselves, that we should teach our children to ask themselves. What does God want me to do? Not what do I want to do? Though our wills, our desires, our what qualities, our gifts, our talents that we have, all these are indications of God's will, because he gives us a particular talent. He gives us a particular desire to do something, to go somewhere, and he inspires us through these means. But we often want to dismiss them because it might be something that is pleasurable to us. So we need really some kind of outside guidance what is it that God wants me to do? But we can, in general, day to day, what is required of me at my work? What does the boss want? What do my parents want? What do my teachers want? What is required of me and my family as, a husband, a father, a wife, a mother? These are indications of God's will in these little things. And bearing these little things patiently, willingly, lovingly, this is the virtue that we're striving after. Not that I need to create a big obstacle or have a big cross and do great things in front of me. God's not interested in quantity, he's interested in quality. If we do these little things willingly, cheerfully, patiently, bear with these crosses, and I know especially children and subjects, they don't tend to be very docile, and it tries our patience to deal with them, to repeat ourselves over and over again. And to many children, it becomes a game. Do this, why? Because I said so, now shut up and do it. Because they keep pushing and pushing, and they want to, I don't think they deliberately want to try our patience, but I really believe it is kind of entertaining to them.
Well, I think at some point as they get older, when they push that way, they figure if they push long enough, they'll just get out of the duty that was asked. And I was like, fine, I'll just do it myself. Too much time is wasted, forget it. And that's, I see myself, if I look back, I've done that. We used to have in school at Our Lady of the Rosary on Fridays, we used to read for a religion class out of a book. And the fathers are very tired. I mean, besides running the school, they were also traveling, doing priestly work, pastoral work. And unfortunately, Father Joseph, and I get it, when you're listening to people read out loud, it's very soothing and you kind of can doze off, and we would watch him doze off. But then we would also in turn ask, on a Friday afternoon too, ask him a bunch of questions right at the end of class so he forget to sign homework. So, just that we're crafty, we're trying to get out of stuff constantly. We all are. I mean, children, adults, and we find ways, and I feel kind of bad about that, but I mean, who wants homework?
Oh, and the child doesn't realize that the parent or the adult realizes what they're doing. And they, a lot of times tolerate it and put up with it because they truly love the child.
Well, I think very often, the child thinks the parent gets to do whatever they want. The grown-ups get to do whatever they want. And then even the parents will look at their child like, well, you don't really have the responsibilities that I have, which is true. You have a roof over your head, you clothes on your back, food on the table. You just need to really just do what I ask. That's all that's needed. And yet, they just see it differently. I mean, children still, they're learning where they're at the age that they're at. And they're going to hopefully mature out of the why. But I don't know. I've seen a lot of adults that want to get out of stuff too. But that's also part of our culture. I think that there's a lot of do what feels right to you. I mean, yes, you have to stand up for yourself. Don't let yourself be walked all over, but you also have to be a team player. I think you have to be agreeable. And that does kind of require patience of yourself and dealing with others. I mean, also realizing as frustrated as you get with other people, you have to remember you're no picnic either. Maybe not to that particular person, but there's someone else you rub the wrong way. None of us are perfect. So I always have to tell myself that if someone grates on me, I was like, yeah, but I know that I can be annoying too. Right?
Exactly.
So here on our podcast, you've admitted that I'm annoying. All right.
We can all be annoying. But,
yes.
Things happen, they occur to us, and we become, I think, possessed or obsessed by an idea, a thought, and we want to share it. And very often our superiors or those around us they're not in the mood to hear it. They're not in the right disposition to hear it. And it is annoying to us. Okay, yes, I get it. You're happy because of this and that. Okay, what's next? Let's move on. And we're not in your joy. I cannot enter into your sorrow or your pain. And it's difficult to be patient, especially with those who are suffering, those who are discontent with their situation in life. They want to complain. They want to tell you all about it. And it seems as if their desire is to drag you into their misery, to make you part of their misery. And I think really the virtue of patience in dealing, especially with those who are sick or not feeling well, is to enter in to sympathize with them, to have a little bit of empathy, to reach out to them. And I know even the sick people need to practice patience. I'm one of the first to admit that I'm a difficult patient. If I'm sick or ill and people want to help me, they want to do things for me, really what I want most is for you to go away, stop talking to me, just leave me alone in my misery, go do something productive. Let me sleep, let me rest, just go away. And even the sick must learn to be patient with those who are trying to help them. To be patient with the doctor who brings the pill. Like my mother used to mention when she was in the hospital, the doctors or the nurses would wake her up to give her sleeping pill. And if you can appreciate the irony in that, it's time for this medication, it's time for that medication, and we're not going to let you sleep, but you need your rest, so take the sleeping pill. And it is enough to try the patience of a saint, as the old people would tell us.
Well, and even though this is not the primary virtue, but charity is always within everything, and charity does go both ways. The person who is sick, and I've grew up with sick people, and I've seen like the temperaments of people who are ill, and I get that it's hard, but the people that want to help you, you should be lovingly receiving that. I mean, if it's really like causing you a lot of anguish, upset, then maybe you just need to be clear. It's like, look, I appreciate you trying to help me, but this is not what I need right now. But let him know that they're still appreciated, because you never know what you might need later on. You don't want to push people completely out, and at the same time, the person that wants to help, you also have to make sure, are you helping to help the person, or really is it for self, I guess, gratification, the pat on the back, like, look how great I am because I
put up with this miserable wretch who is so intolerable.
And then you feel like, and then you feel like you're owed something, whether it's from that person or from other people. And it's just, I feel like it's a vicious cycle that then it becomes about you owe me, and it's keeping score rather than just, we're all made in the image and likeness of God. God loves every single one of us. Therefore, we should love all of us, and we should do it for love and not for our own self, whatever it is that we could gain from it. And just not that self-interest.
To begin seeing Christ in our neighbor, especially our suffering neighbor, to see Christ crucified there, and whatever we think in our prayers and our imagination that we would like to do for Christ as he is suffering on the cross, to tell him we're sorry, to alleviate some of the suffering that we've caused him. Those things that we think of in our prayer that, if I were on Calvary, I would like to do this, I would like to do that. Well, being patient with our neighbor, coming to the aid of those who are sick, imprisoned, hungry, naked, whatever these corporal works of mercy may be, and even the spiritual works of mercy, whatever those may be, if we can see Christ in our neighbor, we will be more inclined to charitably come to the aid of our neighbor, more charitably inclined to be patient with them, because when they're in pain, we become testy, we become irritable, we're not on our best behavior, especially if we're not feeling well. That's not to say always. There are some who suffer well, who suffer patiently for the love of God, and can put up with quite a bit of abuse from those who are trying to take care of them.
Right. What I find kind of interesting, though, especially when you look at Catholics, because we should definitely try harder, and I do find it can be kind of conflicting when the ill Catholic is just. I understand certain illnesses really, really do a number on you, but then it is kind of hard when they're yelling at you, screaming at you, whatever, losing their patience, throwing things. It's just like, how can you really reconcile that? I mean, obviously, like, this person is suffering probably way more than I can realize, so it does help. But then it's just like, well, you say that you love God, but you're treating. I know you're sick, but you're treating me like crap. Like, so I think it is, because this isn't. Patience isn't just about the people helping the ill. I mean, the quote was actually about, or I think the quote was about those even. Or one of the quotes we read, those who are ill is bearing your sufferings patiently. I mean, that's really the key here.
And it's not easy to care for people who are suffering, who are in pain, especially when they appear to be childish, but we cannot see their pain, and we have to be able to try and appreciate their suffering.
We can't get to their level, don't don't sink to that.
We don't, if they throw things, we need to be able to, put our arm around them and say, I love you, I'm concerned about you, but this behavior is not acceptable, that we need to be better disposed because we are Catholics, we are followers of Christ. This is not how Christ would behave, and this is not how we should behave.
So that's an appropriate approach if you're taking care of someone.
To be mild, gentle,
but point
calm, being calm and patient with others and their faults and failings does not mean that you condone it or approve it, or that you even tolerate it. If we're in a position to say this is unacceptable behavior, even from someone who is ill, your illness, you may be trying to use that as an excuse to get away with this, but really you need to do better. You need to rise higher. And I think that is true charity. When we truly love someone, we are not going to let them get away with something. We're going to call them out, but we do so charitably, humbly, lovely, with love and concern in our hearts and our voices, in our actions. It's not just here, you have to do this because it's good for you, because I say so, but really let them know that you love them, that you're concerned for them. And so the patient needs to be patient, and the caregiver needs to be patient. And I think quite often of the letter that I think St. Francis of Assisi wrote to all the Catholic faithful. And one thing that really hit home to me, he said that so often when a person is dying, everyone comes around and says, oh, you're okay, you're going to get better. And they want to be upbeat, they want to support. And he said, this is really one of the most uncharitable things you can do for the soul that is dying. You don't want to give them a false hope that they have more time. If you really love them, you come to them and say, the end is getting closer. You need to prepare your soul. Should I call a priest? Should we, we need to pray. We need to call upon God. We need God in your life because you're not long for this world. We can see that. And yes, there are those in the world who are going to say, oh, but I'm not ready to let go. Well, it's not about you.
So you don't have, God calls you when he wants to. This makes me, take a sip of water. You probably need it. Makes me think about, because in today's world, a lot of things that I read, the mentality out there is really looking strictly out for yourself, and more families are just not there for each other. I mean, I know that in some cases it happens, but it blows my mind when people are like states apart. And I say this because I'm actually like states apart from my family, but they're probably better off. But just like I want nothing to do with my family, and then parents are elderly, they ship them off to the nursing home, And I know in some cases your parents may be of a circumstance that you personally can't care for them. You need that help. There's nothing wrong with that. But I also wonder if we actually all had a more invested interest in each other as a unit throughout our lives, would the elderly parents need so much care? I mean, I think people thrive on other people, the togetherness, and it blows my mind when people want nothing to do with their family. And I understand there are circumstances where that might be what you have to do, but it just, to me, just seeing, there's that mentality that, people should not have children if their mind says that the children's going to take care of the parents when they get older. And then, of course, I'm like, well, what's wrong with that? Your parents took care of you when you were younger, brought you up, did many things for you. Why is it wrong for the parent to hope that their child will be for that there for them someday? Not necessarily always to like shoulder every burden and all the financial stuff, but just to be there. But I don't know,
especially with the COVID crisis that we experienced, going to the nursing homes, the assisted living. I saw, at least what I perceived to be the greatest cross of these individuals, was a sense of abandonment. And really, when you go to see these people, locked in their room, basically solitary confinement, it makes me think of our Lord when he hung upon the cross and, my God, why have you forsaken me? And for these older people who have given their lives, I guess, for their children, hopefully for those around them, to be completely abandoned. And I realize that, the young people have their own lives to live. They have this and they have that. But what is more important here? And then, of course, it'll be these same individuals who don't want to see their parents to die. They don't want to, pull the plug or allow them to pass away. We're going to use every means necessary. We've got, the insurance. We're going to drain the insurance to keep them alive and to keep them here as long as possible. And then I ask, where is your faith? And then I ask, do you really love this individual? Are you doing this because you love them or because you love yourself and you don't want to face this? I can't bring my grandchildren to meet their great grandma in the nursing home because I don't want them to be exposed to the concept of death and suffering. I think this is what your grandchildren need.
Yep.
They need to see the great grandma and know this is what comes for us all. Sooner or later, we all have to die. We have to leave this world. But I don't think that we realize the joy that comes to the great grandmother's heart and seeing that someone just cares enough to stick their head in and say, hello. We need that social environment. And it's not always easy to put up with great grandma. She gets crabby. She gets tired. She's got problems. She's in pain. And sometimes she doesn't say things that are very nice. I don't want my children to hear that vocabulary. I don't want them to be exposed to that. And I can understand that, but I think you can do a lot to prepare them. You can do a lot to prepare your ill person that's in the hospital. Look, I'm bringing my children, and if the conversation goes away I don't like or I think is inappropriate, I will have to take my children out. So please don't be offended.
I sometimes wonder if a lot of the problem is just because we don't communicate. We don't actually, we aren't assertive on either side. And I understand that there might be that conflict of, well, this is my parent. There's an element of respect. Of course, there's respect, but that doesn't mean that, if they're bullying, or let's say they're using colorful language that you do not want to expose your children to, have that conversation. Say, look, I would gladly bring the kids by, but you have to, control yourself, have something. I mean, if you're not feeling well, we come by, we can come back later, just not visit very long.
On the other hand, I do think that we become oversensitive to these words. If you look at the way many of these older people use them, they generally tend to use them in the dictionary definition, not in the popular, vulgar connotation. They use these words as they've used them their whole life, and it is not their fault that the connotation, the definitions have changed.
Or even parenting styles, because I do think there's been some really good developments, because there was a generation where they felt children should be seen and not heard, and really they didn't want to see them either. But that was not a very appropriate mindset. But then at the same time, they view parents who are trying to help their children, because really children need help navigating their, to put on like, well, you need to act like an adult. Well, they're not adults. It requires a lot of patience in the different temperaments of children, but helping them cope with their feelings, helping them talk it out, ask questions. And if you just try to silence them, then you have adults, and I think we talked about this before, you have adults that just throw temper tantrums. It just, and that frustrates me when I see adults get on children for just weird,
the children say something that is colorful. And where did you hear that? You didn't hear that? Yeah, I heard mommy say that. I heard daddy say that. Yeah. And I think too often parents live in this illusion that their children are innocent and unexposed to these things. And I'm pretty sure that by the time they hear it from you or your mother or father, your grandmother, your grandfather, they hear those colorful words, they've already heard it somewhere else.
Probably.
And if they've never heard it before, it's going to go right over their head. Mm-hmm. They won't, it's beyond them. They're not shocked by it. They're not offended by it. The children learn to be shocked. They learn to be offended by the reaction of the parents, of the adults around them. And very often we create a bigger problem ourselves for our children than needs to be. If they're ignorant, they're ignorant. They don't see it. They don't understand it. They may ask questions, and we can explain to whatever level they're able, or we wish to expose them to it. We can explain to that level. But if they're truly ignorant, it's just gone over them. They're not, paying any attention. But if they've heard it before, and I'm pretty sure most of the time the children have usually already heard this in a different context, in a different situation before. And so there's no reason for us to take this out on the elderly. Right. But, it is time for us to, I guess, grow up ourselves and say, okay, these children, they may not have been exposed to this before, but they are now, or they soon will be. Right. I need to prepare my children.
Exactly.
This is my problem. It's not the elderly people's problem.
And that is, you can only guide or keep them from things so much. It's unfortunately evil is out there, and it's, actually, and I feel for parents, especially with the technology of today, which is something Father and I want to talk about at some point. You have to be really on guard more so than ever. Because let's say the technical aspect aside, just in your neighborhood and neighborhood kids, you have to be aware of what those kids, what are their values. I remember talking with a friend a few years ago, and she said that, as much as she would like to just send her kids out to play with the neighborhood kids, she can't do that because these kids play very differently. They'll go out into the woods and not tell anybody, and my kids will just follow if I'm not paying attention. Or this kid's very aggressive and plays very hard, and it's because that's what he's accustomed to. It's just, there used to be a time where people had pretty similar values, and now, especially if we're in a world today where people don't even want to acknowledge God, and therefore they're not bringing their kids to acknowledge God, so therefore there's not any grace. It's very challenging, because then you don't understand why would someone let their kid behave this way, but they don't see the problem. It's just like, well, they're just expressing themselves. But then your kids have to either not make friends, or you really have to, the thing is, just going to have to be on top of it, help them. You're going to have to help them navigate more than ever a lot of situations, and prepare them for the world. Yes, there's things that we definitely don't want them to fall into. And it basically is going to involve a lot of challenging talks and conversations that you really wish you didn't have to have, but I don't see any way around it. And I don't think there was ever a time you could get away with just freely letting your children out into the world. You have to have clear what your values are to your family right off the bat.
And when your children go astray, that's the time you show your patience. That's the time to be patient. When your children are really frustrating you, they're aggravating you, they're disappointing you, that's not the time to blow off steam.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the time to explode. That's the time to calmly bring everything together. Let's look at this rationally, reasonably. And I know that anger rises up very immediately, very quickly, but that's not the answer. That's not what your child needs. Your child needs, and that's not what you need either.
Right.
We need to be patient in dealing with this difficulty. Okay, you made a mistake, however serious it was. I'm disappointed, I'm hurt, because I truly love you. I'm concerned about you. We need to correct this situation. Your friends are doing this. I can't allow you to do this because this is wrong. This is harmful. This is dangerous. Here are the reasons. I don't want you to do this. And I realize that your friends are doing it. The temptation is there. You really don't want to be different. You don't want to be singled out. To enter in patiently, compassionately, charitably into the situation so that your child can understand. I don't think it is enough, at least from my own experience, for your parents to say, don't do this. And you say, why? Because I said so. I don't want to explain it to you. I don't want to have to deal with you. I think more than ever, we need to be able to explain. We need to be able to make this clear to the children why it is we're doing, what it is we're doing, what our goals are, what are the consequences for our actions, and ultimately with the goal of pleasing God and getting into heaven. And so it is difficult when your parents say, you can't be friends with this person anymore. But this was my best friend. Well, this best friend of yours is not such a good influence. And of course, we need to be careful. I was thinking there was a show on Christmas time, The Christmas Story, I think it is, the little boy.
Oh, yeah, I've only seen it once.
It's like it's all self-introspection.
Okay.
So you're watching this movie and the boy is telling you what he's thinking, what's going on. But there's one instance when there's a flat tire and his father's changing the flat tire, and he's supposed to be keeping control of the nuts that came off the bolts, and they're in the hubcap and they go flying, and he lets out a 4-letter expletive, and then he knows immediately he did something wrong. The father goes and whispers in the car to the mother, and it's a silent drive back home. Where did you hear this? And then the boy is telling you from his own introspection, well, I've heard my dad use this word many times, but I can't say that because this is going to make the situation worse. Mm-hmm. So he inculcates his best friend. And then, of course, his mother is on the phone to the mother of his best friend, and he gets his best friend into trouble. So then they get their mouths washed out with soap, and it's a pretty funny scene, but we need to not push the children to lie to us either.
Yes.
It is more than likely the parents are the cause of whatever foul language that the child has learned or picked up or imitated. And we can't be so quick to condemn their friends, their associates. Yes, they very well may have picked it up there. They may have been encouraged and pushed in that direction by their friends. But we need to perhaps teach them how to deal with the situation.
Well, that's why I think having conversations is just so important, thinking critically. And I know that spills over to what I'm really, I guess you say, passionate about as far as catechism. Is like I know there's a place for certain things that you need to memorize, but we need to expound on that. We need to have a discussion about that, because otherwise, how do you really expect it to stick? How do you expect it to really understand? And however they could be able to live it and defend it when necessary. And that's just with any occasion in your life. I mean, you send your kids off to school, they have a bad day, you talk about it, and it's talking it out, seeing where, maybe a missed opportunity, what can we do better, how can we handle the next day. And the thing is, it's an ongoing thing. It's just, and I don't think it matter how old your child gets, there's still going to be a place that you as a parent, you're going to have some sort of influence on your child.
Well, I like to tell the religious that Christ has said, take up your cross daily and come follow me. If you ever wake up one day and you find you don't have a cross, you need to start worrying.
Yep.
Because if Christ has invited us to carry our daily cross, that means he's loves us enough. He knows enough to give us a daily cross. That cross for us each and every day has been given to us by God, and he wants us to bear that cross patiently, lovingly. And I think we need to instill this idea in our children. Yes, you're going to have problems at school. You're going to have problems in your study. You're going to have problems with your friends. There's always going to be problems. Don't panic.
Right.
Don't get anxious about it. Don't get all worked up. Don't fall into despair. This is to be expected. This is part of life. There's always a problem. There's always a difficulty. The mature people learn to recognize the problem. What can I do about it? What should I do about it? How should I react? And you're going to make mistakes, but learn from those mistakes. Okay, today I had a terrible cross that I had to face, and I did not handle it very well. I probably should have said this. I probably should have done that. I probably should have kept my mouth closed. I should have done this. That self-examination leads to the next step. What am I going to do the next time this happens or something similar happens? I need to prepare myself. I need to make a plan because tomorrow I'm going to get a cross again. It may not be this cross, but there will be a cross there. What am I going to do about it? There's going to be a temptation, a trial, a tribulation, a pain, a suffering. There's going to be something, even in the lives of these little children. And I think adults don't realize that their children have crosses too.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Adults are concerned about their own cross, and they think their children have it all so well because I've provided everything for them. I've done everything.
And more. Yep.
And they cannot comprehend that their children has a cross. I remember Bishop Lewis telling us, he says, when you're counseling people concerning love, natural love, human love, he says, remember that puppy love to the puppy is real. So if those in puppy love, even though everybody else can see it, to the puppy, it's real. Yeah. And for you to dismiss it, for you to push it aside, to laugh at it, is hurtful. Yes. It is not helping anything.
Right.
You must enter into the mind of the puppy and realize that to the puppy, this is real. This is serious. This is painful. And if you can have that empathy, then you can help the poor person who is suffering the pains of puppy love.
And I think how quickly we forget what it's like to be young, because I can think of looking back, a number of things that happened that were super embarrassing and just literally, well, not literally, but I guess figuratively, I could die inside. Like that's how it felt. And then now that I'm older and similar things happen, I'm just like, not a big deal. But again, to the child, it's everything. And you just have to be prepared. I mean, it really is. It is an all-in situation. And I wonder if that's why a lot of people are just like, I don't know if I want to have children, which is a whole problem in itself. But even though there's a lot of work, the rewards are great. And I've read somewhere, raise children to be adults you want to be around. And that's not to say and we know that there's the issue with when they're young, you're not their friend. You care about them a great deal, but hopefully at some point as they become adults, while they still be your child, but it's someone that you want to be around and converse with. And I think happily that worked out. I mean, there was a point in my life I didn't want anything to do with my brothers. I thought when I'm 18, I'm not going to talk to them. Or even there was conflict with my parents, and now we can talk. I think part of it is realizing that none of us are perfect. We all have our faults. Just because so-and-so was impatient and rude to me at this time doesn't mean I was never the same in another instance, or just somebody else. There's always just basically you're no picnic, and when you want to feel really down, whether it's a coworker that's giving you a hard time, a child, a friend, again, you're just not completely without fault. Maybe in that instance that you may not have instigated, but there's just, we're all fallen creatures. We have our own quirks and we get on people's nerves. And I guess all this to say that we're all here to help each other get to heaven.
Yeah. And we're each other's cross.
Yes, I know. I'm your cross.
If we understand that and we learn to be patient, to accept our cross cheerfully, willingly, it works out good for everyone. You did mention, that parents aren't their children's friend. And I think this whole idea of friendship has been really taken out of consequence. Yeah. Christ is our friend. Mm-hmm. And Christ loves us enough to put us in our place when we get out of line. We sin and our conscience bothers us. We feel miserable. These emotions come over. They can even pour over and affect our health, and we can get upset stomach. We can, all these things come about because God loves us. He is truly our friend. So our friend isn't just someone who confirms us and accepts us, mm-hmm. and whatever we do, however we are.
Point.
No, our friend is someone who loves us enough to say, stop, don't do this. This is not right. Mm-hmm. Our friend has to be someone who loves us. And in that sense, I think our best friends are our parents, good parents who are willing to step up and say, I love you enough that I am not going to let you do this. We need to put a stop to it. The whole idea of spanking, I said, the father who can honestly say to his son or daughter, whoever he has to discipline, this truly hurts me more than it hurts you. If he can say that honestly, I think then he has the right or the duty to spank or discipline in that way, because he's not doing it out of anger. He's not doing it out of frustration. Yeah. It is actually motivated by love. I hate to impose this penance upon you, this suffering, this cross, but this is what you need. And I'm doing this because you need it, not because I want to do it. And really, Christ embraced the cross, not because this is something that he loved. He found pleasure in it. He found pleasure in it. He loved it because he loves us. And this is what was necessary to free us from our sins. This is what was necessary for our own good. And so parents need to be willing to pick up that cross out of love for their children. They need to be ready to teach their children to embrace their own crosses out of love for Christ. And the best way to teach is by our example.
Yes.
You want your children to be patient. They need to see that you are patient.
If you want your child to be a good Catholic adult, you better be an active Catholic adult. It's not just going to church on Sunday and calling it good. It has to be actively studying your catechism. We talk about that a lot. The journey to heaven, the journey to knowing, loving, serving God is an everyday thing. There should never really be a point in your life like, well, I've learned all I need to know about my catechism. I'm good. No, absolutely not. And, my Catholic faith that we're going over for Monday Night Religion class, and recordings are up online. That book in itself, even if you don't follow the recordings, is so simply laid out. You could take it just a chapter at a time, and there's so much to gain from it. And once you're done reading it, read it again. But you can't...
Or just occasionally open it up at random.
That too. But also, if you really want your child to have a prayer life, they need to see you praying. And I would say that, that's not even parents itself, but adults in general. I mean, we all have a concern for the children, what's going to happen. We have, make sure you're an adult that a child sees that also loves God. Be an example. If you want your child to pick up a spiritual book, they also need to see you taking it seriously. And I know for a fact that has a lot of weight, because we grew up seeing our father very dedicated to his faith. He'd pray outside of times with praying with us. It was important to him. So as much as we know how important a family rosary is, and we're trying to, people encouraging to take up that activity together, you also need to be devoted to a prayer life for yourself.
Be the adult you want your children to become.
Yep.
They will imitate your example more than your lecture, your talking. They will imitate what you are.
Well, and especially when children, and I'm pretty sure it starts at a fairly young age, but when you get to like teenagers, they're looking to, if you're being hypocritical, they're ready to jump on that. And it's, you have to be careful with the do as I say, not as I do. And I realize that, it's not right for the child to have that mentality. I think what has helped was that we, as you brought up, sometimes a parent owes the child an apology. I've made a mistake. And that has a lot of weight and merit to it, to actually having a communication with your child, to help them to develop into a worthwhile human, we're all worthwhile human being, a good adult, but also someone who loves God. You can't.
Well, how is your child going to learn how to admit their mistakes and correct them if they don't see it played out in front of them? We learn from example, from following, from imitation. And if I can see that, my father, I knew he made a mistake, but later on he came back and he admitted, yes, I was wrong. I should not have done this. I should not have said this. I wish I would not have done this. And this is what I wish I would have done. The father is now modeling for his son. When you find you've made a mistake, be a real man and admit your mistake and do what you can to correct it. Don't pretend that it was okay and it was nothing. It can be easily ignored or brushed aside. You've hurt someone, be man enough to apologize. Be man enough to own your mistake. And we learned that from the example. If my father is never man enough to admit his mistake, then I will never be man enough to admit my mistake.
Well, just as you don't want a child to obey out of fear, and just as God does not want us to keep his commandments because we fear hell. I mean, it's something we should not take lightly, but we're obeying his commandments because we love him. And that's something we want everyone, and that's what you want your child to do is you ask them to do because of love, not because, well, if you don't do it, you're going to be punished. And I know it's difficult. It's going to be quite challenging, but
yeah. Well, I'm not suggesting that parents apologize for things that shouldn't be apologized for. If you do something, even if it is uncomfortable to your child, you may say something, I'm sorry that you were hurt by this. Ooh. But I was not wrong. I needed to do this. It needed to be done. I'm sorry that it hurt you like this or that you've taken it this way, but here is why. This is what I need you to understand. I corrected you because I love you. And I believe that this correction was deserved. It was appropriate. And if it was not, I'm sorry, but I do believe it was, because I want you to understand the seriousness of what we're dealing with.
I'm kind of glad you went full circle on that, because the whole I'm sorry if I is kind of touchy, especially among adults, because that's a non-apology. It's just dismissing the feelings of the person. And I think that's something to really kind of consider, even though you as a parent are absolutely correct in the correction of your child. It doesn't mean that their reaction is inherently wrong. I mean, some children are more sensitive than others. It's just like some children, a swat on the bottom is not going to do anything for them. They don't care. I mean, they look as go ahead, spank me, because then it'll be over with. It's a development learn what will really register with your child as far as a disciplinary action. Some kids, not locking them in their room, but sending them to a room. For some kids, that is, when I was sent to my room, it was fine because I would just read and everybody would leave me alone. So that wasn't really a good punishment. But I don't know actually what would have been for me as a child. I think yelling at me was probably enough to. made me think, as much as I hate raised voices, and my family's loud. So,
but I do think parents need to model to their
Agreed.
children, especially the virtue of patience. Your children are going to be testing your patience, trying your patience deliberately or indeliberately. They're going to be doing it, and how we react models to the children how they should react, how they should handle this. And just because someone upsets us doesn't mean that that person was wrong. Just because someone has hurt us doesn't mean that person was wrong.
Doesn't mean they're evil.
And so we need to be able to model that to the children. And so even if our correction was not received well, we have to be able to come to the child and say, I understand this did not go well for you. This wasn't how I expected you to receive this correction, and I'm sorry for that.
Yep, that's good.
I didn't think this through clearly enough. I could have done this. I should have done this, but the correction was necessary. What you were doing needed to be corrected because I love you. But perhaps I could have done better in the execution of the correction, or in the penance that I have imposed upon you could have been better thought out. That willingness to own, I'm not perfect,
right?
But neither are you.
Right.
You needed to be corrected. I'm in the position of authority, and I have to correct you because I have to answer to God for your soul, right, and for how I teach you and I want you to understand that I love you, right, and it really hurts me more than it's hurting you.
Right. And it's a development of the relationship. I mean, and as parents grow, or as children grow, the parents grow, and the parent doesn't, have the child automatically knows what's going to work. It's discovering that, because some children need like the harsher tone, and some need to have a hug and talk it out. And you don't know that until you start really working with your child. And I think with a lot of our listeners, the age of our listeners, they probably have gone through this too. They look back now and they can see how human their parents were. Like the things that is like, why would they but you get it now, because, for every child, there's more experience, but then every child's different. So it's a different experience. And then this generation is now having their own children, and, they might go, well, I'm never going to make the same mistakes my parents made. But you come to find out there's still, you realize that were those actually mistakes? I look at a lot of things. My parents did the best they could with what they had. And it's so,
if they had better children, it wouldn't have been so hard.
That is also true. I have talked to some people. I said, I came to a point where I did apologize to my parents, because I can look back and see that, yes, I was very moody as a teenager. I was not, I was not a very good daughter. And I don't want this to be like, well, see, and look what happened to me. I want to do what I can to help young women, especially, young children, to be the best child of God they can be. I'm here to help with that. You're here to help with that. So that we can all, then grow into an adult who loves God. But again, none of us are perfect, and kind of just realizing that. And sometimes you can do what the books say in anything and think, well, then it'll be fine. I checked off all those boxes, and then you come to find out that
it wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough. So,
we check off the physical boxes, but they're spiritual ones. Did I do this with true love in my heart? Did I have the right intention? Did I have the right motivation? It's not that just, if you spare the rod, you will spoil the child. So I have to spank my child. Okay, I spanked my child today. I'm good. I'm a good parent. No, we need to look at the why, the how, the motivation. And the children, if they can't see that in you, that you're acting out of a motive of love, you need to explain it to them. And I think, one of the virtues they need to see is this patience. And I think that's where most parents are sadly lacking. We don't have patience for our children because we don't have time. We have not allotted enough time to be with our children, to teach our children, to engage with our children. Our days are full, we're tired, and we sent our children to school. We pay the teachers with our taxes or whatever. So all that should be done. I shouldn't have to deal with it. I've worked hard. I want to come home. I want to relax. I don't want to deal with their problems, and we're impatient with them. And I think that needs to be corrected. Your children are your primary focus, and it's not enough to say, well, I go to work and earn a living so I can put a roof over their head, feed them and clothe them, and I send them to school. Those are all material things. What about the spiritual? What have we done for their souls? What are you doing for your own soul? Do you love yourself enough to strive to get to heaven? You can't love your children unless you first love yourself. Do you love God? Do you want to get to heaven? Don't tell me you don't care about your own soul and you only want to see your child in heaven, because then I will call you a liar.
Yeah.
And your children will call you out. You're lying. We need to make the time to engage with our children, to be patient with them. It doesn't have to be all fun and games, but it can't be all seriousness either. We should set aside time to pray. And it should not be a burden. It should not be oppressive. It should not be something we just check off our
Right.
box, but it is something that we can spend time together talking to God. And we can give the children an opportunity. Do you have any special requests from God that you would like to pray with? Or I've got this special problem that's bothering me. Would you pray with me and ask God to help me through this situation?
Yep.
I don't think children are ever too young to know that there are problems in the world, that parents have difficulties, that we all need God, and that we need to pray to God when we have a problem. And it is okay to ask others to pray with us or to pray for us. Ask your children to pray for you. Ask them, let them know, I'm suffering. I've got this problem. I've got this cross. I really don't know which way to turn. I need God's help. And if you will pray with me, I'm sure that God will show us the right way.
I mean, imagine if you're having a bad day and you said to your child, I'm having a little bit of a rough day. Will you pray for me? And I bet that child will get right on. And that's just a great example and a habit that can just carry on. And then you find yourself praying automatically for people in their situation, and it helps grow in that empathy to realize, you're not the only one with problems. Everybody has a cross. But I hope people weren't like finding this, hopefully encouraging, but I mean, it was very truthful, obviously, but do be patient with yourself. We all know that everybody didn't come with their own personal instruction manual. There's different temperaments. Every child's different. I mean, my parents had a very quiet, well-behaved first child.
And then
he set the bar really high, especially intellectually. It's just, oof. But, and then you get, me. So, just take courage. Don't give up. We're obviously praying for the parents. That's part of our daily routine. And you're not alone. God is there with you, looking out.
I can imagine it would be a great joy to a mother or father to have their child come in all seriousness. I've got this problem, or my friend has this problem, or I've seen on the news, this terrible disaster. Let's pray that how can we help them? Let's pray and ask God to send his blessings to protect those in need, or to console those who have lost, to let your child know. You don't have to show them all the news or what's going on in the world, but when they do see something and their tender hearts are touched, that is a moment, I think, that is one of the greatest consolations and joys to a parent. My child is a considerate human being who loves, who can empathize, who is compassionate, and wants to do, not just physically, but spiritually, wants to remember them in their prayers, wants me to pray with them. And it's not just, before I go to bed, I say my prayers, God bless Grandma and Grandpa and all the sick and all this. And it just becomes a litany for them to check off. But the times when it becomes something more than that, you know, can we dedicate this decade of the Rosary for those who suffered in the tornado or the hurricane or the earthquake in that part of the world that I don't even know them, but can we pray that God will help these individuals? Or can I dedicate this decade of the Rosary for the intention of helping my best friend's mother or father or grandmother, or, you know, someone who has just passed away, to let them know, there's these crosses and we can help by our prayers, and we can help even more where we come together and pray together.
Right, because we're not meant to go to heaven alone. It's, you know, you really can't, I can't have in my mind, like, it's just all about me and whatever I need to do to get there. You have to want to bring people with you. That's really the only way. I don't think you can actually strive for heaven as just me at any cost. You have to.
Well, I've had parents ask me, you know, how can I get my children to behave at Mass? I said, well, they come to church once a week, probably at the most. And that hour or whatever it is there at Mass, it's all about behave, sit still. And there's no real time for prayer. And so my encouragement is that bring your child to the church some other time. Bring your child to the church during the week with a special intention. We're going to church. We're going to ask the Blessed Mother to help us in this situation. We're going to go to church to pray before Jesus in the tabernacle. You know, it doesn't have to be long. Just show your children that I go to church to talk to Jesus, to talk to the Blessed Mother. Light a candle. It's something to do, physically to do. It is enticing to the children. Here, let's light a candle. Let's put a donation in the box there. Okay, so let them take the money, put it in the box, kneel down at the communion rail, say an Our Father or Hail Mary, say out loud your intention. You know, Holy Mary, please pray for this person, pray for this situation. We need your help. Let your child hear vocally these prayers so that they have something to imitate.
And I would like to add, and even if you don't have children or your children are already grown and out of the house, it's not too late to start making an effort to come and visit the chapel or church during the week. There's nothing really, I know, and we talked about this in a previous episode. You know, I realize for some people there's distance involved, but that's part of the sacrifice. Like you point out, even that drive there and back is part of that prayer. And it's just sometimes we always think about, well, what's the return, you know? But that, I think that intimate time to visit Jesus will have a lasting impact, well, on yourself, first of all, because I think sometimes on a Sunday, it's chaotic for a variety of reasons, not even just the children, just people getting there and getting on time and all those things. And you're not as recollected as you ought to be, even if you don't have the responsibilities of children. And it just also ends up being more like, well, we have to go to church on Sunday, so therefore I go. And then you just treat it almost like it's just.
But if you make time, I want to go to church, I'm going to set aside this or that so we have time so we can go to church and say this prayer. And it, you know, as I say, it doesn't have to be long, you know, 5 minutes. Light a candle, say a Hail Mary, and go do your shopping or whatever it else is you need to do while you're out and about. And then your child has learned a valuable lesson. Mom or dad has made time during their busy day to talk to Jesus. This is important. This is beautiful. And they will have fond remembrances of this, and they'll want to repeat that.
And I think that's what will help them carry it over when they come on Sunday, that they could see that quiet moment, that special moment, and think, well, but that's still the same Jesus as it was with less people in the building. And, you know, it is God's house, and we try to implement, you know, this is God's house, it's special. And sometimes it's hard to convey that in the hecticness of a Sunday Mass. That's why, you know, taking the extra outside time, which I get, again, will be a sacrifice for a lot of people as far as making a drive, the gas money. But how often have you put no sort of stipulation on a worldly endeavor?
Oh yeah, we put gas in the car to go to a birthday party, to go to Chuck E. Cheese's, to go get
amusement
pizza,
park, whatever.
go to the zoo, or to go here, to go there, take my children to soccer practice, baseball, basketball, dance lesson, gymnastics. We have all these things. We don't have time to do the same for Jesus.
Yep. I mean, it's not saying that those things are wrong, but you do have to prioritize. I mean, what really is the most important thing you have? And you can't just keep saying Jesus is the most important thing. You have to show Jesus is the most important thing. And I think if there's a will, there's a way. And if you really want your child to love God throughout their whole lives, these are the things you need to do. You need to find a way to make it happen. Well, with that, should I end with the quote from Romans?
Okay.
Is that the book of Romans? Is that St. Paul to the Romans? Is that how that works? So it's be patient in tribulation and persevering in prayer. And that's Romans chapter 12, verse 12. So with that,
I give you my blessing. Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendet super vos et maniat semper. Amen.
well, thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Deo gratias.
Deo gratias.